Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to have you again on yet another episode of Focus on Parliament. And today we want to do a dive in and, look at Parliament in a whole. The year has been quite, eventful. And also, it had its moments. So we want to sit down and have this conversation and check ourselves on what happened, how do we move forward. And it's important because that is how life is lived. I am your host, Tricia, Gloria, Nabaye, and I have two people here to help me join and have this conversation. And I'll let them introduce themselves and then we kick in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Tricia. And indeed, it's a pleasure to be here to speak to the public, to share how Parliament has been like. I was here at the start of my term. I think I've been here twice,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And also through the budget process, as women, we were here, to share our views, the takeaways. So it is good to be here.
Yeah.
My name, Atukwasa-Woman, and I'm the woman member of Parliament for Mbarara City, a new city.
Amen.
And yes, and I think Mbarara is growing into the name. And
It
in
is.
Ankole, we say that the name, when somebody gives you the name, it actually has meaning and reflection
Yes.
on you, what you become, what you be. So we are the city of the cities.
Of the cities. And for me, my bonus on that is that it is a woman at the helm of that city. And so you represent such a beautiful constituency. And I'm hoping to see more development come out of Mbarara City.
Yes, one especially that is sustainable.
Yes.
That we are in an era of climate change. We are in an era of inclusivity. And for me, I carry that. I carried it in the campaign. I will carry it forever because other cities look different.
Yes.
But how we protect our environment from where we are at, most of the areas are also rural, and then we have the urban. So it is very important for us to give direction on not to lose that green.
And keep Mbarara City green.
Yes.
Welcome to the show, Honorable. And have you, Chemonges, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Tricia. My name is Chemonges Timothy, and I work with Parliament Watch Uganda, an institution that tries to check but also monitors and track the work of Parliament and generally to create the bridge between Parliament and the people. That through provision of information, convening dialogues, ensuring that there is really information, relevant information, and that is very useful for the public, but also to see at the national conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad to be here.
And for the better part of my knowledge on Parliament, Parliament Watch has been very helpful in bills passed, in policies happening, in the debate in the House, in the order paper. That's information that is important for people that are looking out for the development of their country. But ladies and gentlemen, particular for me this year, a lot in the enveloping of a lot that has happened. We had moments that we had to write back, first precedents that also happened for us, and maybe to have a general look back. What stood out for you this year in regards to the 11th Parliament?
What stood out for me was the leadership. As a member of Parliament for the first time, it was very exciting to swear in. That is a very exciting moment for everybody. And then we went through the induction and then the sitting. Of course, at first with COVID, there was the tent.
Yes.
And I really want to affirm that whereas we were sitting in the tent, we were all yearning to be in the house that is the real
yes.
house. But some things are beyond our control, and God knew the path that Parliament would take, and of course the passing on of Olanya was such a terrible thing. After we had gone through the rigorous campaigns to elect the leadership. And then we were all happy, Olanya, the eloquent guy, Olanya, the open-minded guy. and he knew most of us by name. And even when I was giving my tribute, I said for what reasons he knew me for was gender activist, and then he would say, my gender activist, you know, and I would be like, yes, he really knows what I stand for. And I mean, the worst happened. But how the leadership that emerged therein, I think for me that is outstanding. You can imagine we going through elections and the deputy speaker then, Anita, among all of us, we think we will be mentored. If today you are an assistant executive director, there is a way you think of somebody to look up to. It didn't happen. She woke up and she was the speaker, full swing, managing all the sessions, and she did well. But also they say even amongst thorns there grow roses. It was a turbulent moment, but see how two great people that yearned to serve the Parliament of Uganda are rightly placed.
And maybe also to bring Chemonges on that very note, and as he also gives us his highlight, it's quite, and I keep looking back in retrospect and I'm like, there was a time these two, the speaker and the deputy, were actually in opposition. And here they are in the ruling government serving in this acting government. You know, what dynamic does that make when it comes to crossing the floor, especially in our politics, and in the intricate nature of our multi-party politics? What does that speak for different entities? Is it possible that in this crossing of the floor, we might have leaders that we missed along the way because they were serving in the opposition, or they were part of the opposition parties?
So thank you so much, Tricia. And even probably before I respond to that, I must say that the 11th Parliament, within the existing circumstances, they have performed extremely good. They have also had a fair share of their challenges and shortcomings, and others within their means, others outside their capacity. For me, really, for the 11th Parliament, on a positive note, two things really. The first is their capacity to ensure that there is action. You've seen the speaker as they've introduced what they call action reports.
Yes.
We've had it before, where Parliament passes resolutions, makes recommendations, and they go. However, at the end of the year, they come through they are responded through what they call Treasury Memorandum. But now they have adopted the action taken forward. Extremely good. And I think that, of course, there are challenges with that. What happened this time is you had too many resolutions being compacted, yet in so limited time, and you cannot critically look into them. And I think it's something that, as time goes, it will be perfected. Two, within the mandate of Parliament, which is appropriation, there is what the 11th Parliament has introduced for the finance to table the performance, budget performance reports, that we appropriate this amount of money. So you have to come back.
Tell us.
That is done quarterly.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting view for me. If well executed, you can clearly see that it will yield results.
And so we have checks in understanding how the budget was and the money put thereon was spent.
Yeah, because you see, actually, in certain instances, you see monies are spent outside what was appropriated.
Oh yeah.
You have misappropriation of money, and yet it's only Parliament with the mandate to do that appropriation. No any other institute or institution, except for when you are delegated to do that. So for me, those two things really, on a positive note, stood out in the 11th Parliament, and specifically now for the leadership of Parliament. For me, really, it speaks of how the nature of probably leadership that we have today. You have the late speaker passing on, and immediately you're given a whole mandate. Actually, you have members who are largely, our attrition rate in Uganda is fairly large. So you have new members.
Yes.
And then you have new leadership.
Yeah.
And somehow they manage to maneuver through.
No vacuum.
No vacuum.
So it was interesting because we had new cities, and that was new leadership. And then within our intricate politics of gender Mandarin, we also had new constituencies. And here we are with people that had never been at the front of parliament, also at the leadership. Because apart from Deputy Speaker Among, also as she was the now Speaker, Deputy Speaker now Tayewa had not been in that position, and it was such a new grounding for him. But I'm impressed with how he has carried on for now in holding the 11th Parliament into possession.
Yes, and I think for me, really, when that happened and there were conversations of who would be the speaker, for me, I had no doubt. I said, first of all, Anita Among had performed. But I personally, I had watched her when she was on Kosasi, on those back committees. I really admired her, always, whenever she would be chairing those committees. But also it speaks volumes. Personally, I have grown to where I am because people open opportunity even when I have not done it before. And one of my mentors would always say, be very confident of people who are doing something for the first time because they give it their all. And they bring new ideas, new opportunities, new innovations because you want to do it well. Yes. And for me, that speaks volumes, that people should stop worrying about what the future will be in terms of leadership. Because people think to do certain things you must have done. There might be surgery, but also I know there must be first time where a surgeon is training another and says you are going to open the brain. Because the senior surgeon wants this junior surgeon to open. Yeah. Do you know how delicate that is? And in the same scenario, for me, I think it's like a generation rhetoric. My grandmother would always actually wonder. She would say, I don't know what kind of wives you people you will make. We are here wonderful wives, mothers, leaders. It always happened to the other generation. Why? Because sometimes dynamics are different. The story is different. The realities are different. I cannot say that this 11th Parliament will be like the 10th. No. We will only be the 11th Parliament with our challenges, with our opportunities, with our achievements, and see how the two things that Chemonges has highlighted were like really thorns in the systems of Parliament. That you make resolutions after another. There was always a question, so what? So what? But at least now, managing to answer some trend of so what gives energy. That they can come back and tell us. And then you know what happened. If they can't, why? And it must be a formidable reason, not excuses. Yeah. So those were two critical gaps to make sure that Parliament is seen to be working. They can't give you money if it is for maternal health, if it is for maybe HIV, and then all of a sudden you've done a road. You will account for the people who died.
Interesting.
And things happening in this country. The other day, on Thursday, I met, we were at a platform, indeed, parliamentary discussions, and there was a lady from Uganda Road Farm Commission, how she was telling us how they are doing studies to do with drug administration, how they are doing studies to do with animal health, and how I actually said, you have given me great hope. That if Uganda Road Farm moves away from social norms and the laws we see obvious to that line, then we are growing.
Yeah, that's interesting. But let me bring Timothy in here. Part of the 11th Parliament is that we also have the leader of opposition, and then we have the opposition that takes precedent as well, and always has a say in the matters that happen in the House. But a lot of the the face and the actions or behaviors of the opposition this time has been on defiance and bailout. And I think key for me was their bailout on the ELA elections. And I don't know if it's rightly so, but they had reasons why. And so we've had moments where the opposition has been missing in action in proceedings or in activities within the parliament. How do we, have or assess that impact and that contribution or lack thereof of the opposition in having, a whole picture of what parliament is with sitting government and the alternative government?
Yeah, so thank you so much, Tricia. First of all, I need to mention that even having this conversation, it's good to highlight that in trying to check Parliament, it's fair to look at it within its mandates, which is largely misconstrued, and you find the MPs and largely Parliament bearing the brunt of the misconstrued roles of the members of Parliament. And so you find that what ideally they're expected by the electorate and the public is slightly different from what
they're executing.
True. So you find that the judgment there or the parameters differ. And so it's usually, I think, fair to highlight that members of parliament, primarily, their roles is to legislate. That's putting in place the laws, to ensure that they appropriate the budget, that the budget is brought, and they ensure that they share the cake. 3 is to do the representation, and the representation in there, you're looking at having to voice the views of their constituents, the people they represent on the floor. And from there, the executive is supposed to take action. And then lastly is the role of oversight, ensuring that you've appropriated the money and it exactly does what you've done. And so that for me has been a bit issue that there has to be more conversation about, more sensitization of the public, but specifically now on the opposition. The opposition plays a very key role in ensuring that the current government actually does, because you check, and you've seen the current opposition which we have, they're fairly done well within the circumstances. We've seen the number of statements, alternative reports, minority reports, the bills that they have brought in. Actually, they have brought for this year. They have brought 3 private members' bills. They have presented close to 10 minority reports, almost 23. Actually, that's 6 matters of national importance, and so on and so on. You notice with that there is effort being put to ensure that they check the government, although there are still issues. There have been largely the dynamics which they are playing around in Parliament. Talk about there have been concerns that some of the opposition MPs are being compromised, and so they cannot execute their work as expected. There are issues also. There have been back and forth between the different opposition parties. The opposition within the opposition. And so if you look at the role of the opposition, and I really like the current leadership of the opposition, they have chosen to dialogue as opposed to jumping on
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was waiting
on tables, which is very, very critical. Although I know that that approach is not very popular with the public. What the public would sometimes want to see is the jumping
fireworks.
on the table. You be a bit.
I think that is why they've not been understood.
So
it's a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, it paints a very bad picture. So, but the other thing, even in that dialogue, I was listening to Matthias Mpuga the other day when he was addressing a presser, and he was concerned that sometimes they have called for meetings, especially on the matters of these arbitrary arrests, and sometimes the executive has not turned up. But by and large, you notice that opposition today, they seem to have understood their role. They seem to know their target. You've seen they have a legislative agenda, although of course the government is the one which is mandated to come with business. But you see that there's effort towards ensuring that they check the government, they focus in delivering that service delivery into the public. Yeah.
So how do we deal with and I feel bad because there were times we needed them to have representation for us, and maybe it is a question then I would rather have put to the opposition to understand, their point of view in regards to, no, in this particular session we will sit it out. And there were instances I hoped, especially for the Iyala election, I really hoped that they should have been present,
surely.
regardless of what the outcome is. But I also know that is it feeds back from the stand they've been taking on by-elections of we shall stop to participate. I think after the Gulu election they stopped to participate in the by-elections, and the by-elections after the Gulu went unanimously into the NRM camp because they felt to. So how do we, fill that gap?
Yeah, thank you, Tricia, and to again the Parliamentary Watch and Chemonges. For me, the opposition, I like the method of work because I think, the level of understanding and doing things depends on what the leader perceives to be right. And we are at a state of a country where we would want to keep the pace as Parliament leading as an example. That when we are faced with all these massacre pangas and some think it's the opposition, and then for me I think it's a good method of work that they have chosen to work at parliamentary level. Not because they don't disagree. We have disagreed at some points, and you find what the government line is doing, they absolutely do not want to take that. But Iyala, for me personally, sometimes when you measure your strength and sometimes you feel you cannot match, I think they usually want to chicken out and say, we are not participating. And politics, you always look for the most valid reason. But in the corridors, ever since we were sworn in, the major party, NUP, was very clear. They said they have no candidate. And we would ask them, they are our friends, why not? Why would I want to see a new person or DP or UPC in Iyala? After all, it's provided for by the Constitution. But they kept saying they have no
Candidate.
no candidate. And I think for me, that was the main reason. Maybe they are not prepared very well and they were not ready. And I think, really, because you would ask them, initially, those who first sought my vote for DP guys, Selanda, were no people. I won't mention names. And then I would ask, but don't you have a candidate? They said, no, for us, we have no candidate. So I think that it emanates from that. But also the fear of numbers. That if they cannot find allies to win with, then it was going to be an automatic loss. That we cannot deny. That it would be an automatic loss. Because if it is subject to the entire vote of the House, then which means NRM still remains with a larger mandate to determine who the candidate would be, unless the methodology of the vote is changed. To say, are you going to vote opposition alone, or so that one is no. It's very clear that as long as it is the entire parliament and then NRM has majority vote. So and
I'm glad that you mentioned that, Honorable
Ritah,
because with the East African Legislative Assembly, we were hoping, or I was hoping, that there would be equal representation of all political parties within Uganda, because then it at least gives a diversity of voice that goes to the East African legislation, but also representation of both the opposition and also the ruling government. And I think in changing rules and procedures, is it possible to have a cap to say that we'll have, members from the opposition go to the Iyala, and there'll be elections on that regard, and also members from the ruling government, so that we have a diversity of, representation, but also that there is equal representation. It may never really be equal, but
this is a very interesting scenario where equity does not seem to represent equity.
Yes,
because it goes by numbers. And as long as it is a question of formula of numbers, it cannot change. It's like the argument about the money. If you're giving support from iPod to parties according to their numerical strength, it's like if you're doing food ration, when we would, as a social worker in the HIV/AIDS programming, vulnerable children, the rations of food were given according to numerical strength of families. So if you found this family had children plus orphans they're supporting, they're about 12, you're not going to give the same portion as those who are. So the question is, do we want to go back and revise the rules? But if the rules stay as they are, the formula is correct. If the way it was framed and agreed upon. Otherwise, the opposition is represented. Would you say DP is not a political party? It is. They have representatives in parliament. And indeed, the DP candidate from the opposition is in the parliament. And then we have independents. They are equally represented. So for me, I think as long as we are going by the rules, it is doing well.
So maybe if I can just maybe also chip in on the same, I think that also it's fair to note that this matter on Yala elections has been litigated to the East African Legislative Assembly, and there is a position that has been given, and the most recent case was by the current leader of parliament, Ritah. And the court really, though it didn't give a clear stand in that this should be this, it left it at the country level. And so when I listened to the voices from the opposition, it seemed to be the matter had been already predetermined, the Yala election. Their concern is that this matter had already been predetermined, both in terms of the conduct of the ruling party, of the ruling party, but also in terms of when the day of election, there were concerns that the manner in which the elections was conducted first, the manner in which the ballot paper that had candidates was structured. There seemed to be some sort of predetermined candidates. But also then that speaks to the fact that I think that we need to have a sort of conversation regarding this specific matter, because it's not the first time it's coming up. In the previous parliament, the same issue came up about Yala, and it keeps on coming over and over and over. And if you are to remain with the current matrix of how Yala MPs come to place, it's clearly that we shall actually continue to have the dominant party
represent us
but I would want to be fair to the candidates. We all look for votes, and for sure, in any environment where it is politics and you are going to vote based on capacity and canvassing votes, they did look for these votes. From even before swearing, when they knew these members of parliament were gazetted, they started looking for votes. And I want to repeat it. Apart from the guy who made it on the DP ticket, Honorable Siland, I did not see any other. At a later stage, UPC came in. At a later stage, the leader, Honorable Baswara's party, came in. Really at the tail end, what did you expect? These people were on their toes looking for votes. They are playing games, they are doing all these things, trying to make sure their face, their name, members know what they stand for and what they would want. Even those who Kakoza, for instance, all these people, they were looking for votes. So you cannot lie behind. You come too late, you realize the race has left you, and then you want to bring all excuses.
So, Honorable Atukwasa, can we say that the Yala election was free and fair?
Yes, it was free and fair.
I'll leave it at that. And I'll bring in Timothy there. When we look at the work that has happened and has gone on in Parliament, we cannot divorce it from the influence of the executive. And it's critical for us to understand, how lensing around the executive has been very hard in regards to the work that Parliament does. How do we, continue to think of a separation and even with the legislative, but in this case, we are talking about parliament. How do we continue to think of a separation when it comes to, decisions of parliament and the decisions of the executive? And I'll give a stance. When at the beginning of the 11th parliament, there was talk of, going into the parliamentary system of elections when it comes to the presidency. And it's quite a sticky conversation that had begun. And I don't know why it died off.
Yeah.
And the people that are at the forefront of it were from the ruling government. And it was problematic because it almost looked like it was a mandate and a push from the executive. So how do we have this, separation and this, in as much as they're bridged together, but that they can have functions, separated from the principal and from parliament?
So thank you, Tricia. So one thing is good to probably understand is that while the different arms of government ideally should work independently, they are interconnected.
Yeah.
Their roles are interconnected. The role of parliament feeds in directly to the role of the executive, and now you see the judiciary coming on board. And it is in the interest of any government to ensure that they have control of let's say legislature to push in their manifesto, their mandate which they got from the people. Now, the challenge comes in at a point where parliament has to take a position, sometimes independent of the executive.
Yeah.
And that, I think, it's also very tricky because you see our setting is that we have the majority of the MPs are NRM.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you look at it, if you try to look at it in an objective manner, it is just fair that the executive should be able, if they have the mandate, specific ideas or specific issues they want to address in fulfillment of their manifesto, their whatever they promise to the people, it's passed through parliament.
Yeah.
Now the biggest issue now is in how parliament can make specific positions that are firm, that directly feed into the mandate without being compromised and serving the interest of individuals, of say institutions, which for me I think that there's that has not been it has been a bit of an issue that over years we still face, where we see the executive, not all the times, but sometimes having a direct feed and influence on how parliament goes about its business in terms of when there are specific interests that say the executive wants, it will go through. And so for me that of course also partly affects the way the delivery. So there have been this debate about censuring
of ordinary presence.
Yeah, it's a matter that was there in the 10th Parliament, and now it's here. And it's not that I'm saying that seems to be a very minor issue, but the point is sometimes if you look at the way the two conduct themselves, it's like it's one
entity.
Yeah, one entity, which in a clear setting sometimes that affects service delivery. You have we have actually ministers who who sometimes make the work of parliament extremely hard. They don't come for sittings, but even when they come, they are not prepared. You ask, what can you do? Where are we? You ask
What is
questions,
your response on
and
this?
there is really nothing that you. It
I will
affects.
consult.
I will consult. Parliament has had to adjourn sittings because ministers are not there, and it's not the first time. It's something which I saw Honorable Bua, the government chief whip, when he just assumed office. He came with some sort of rota, a list of which ministers will be on what date. It seems not to be working, and so it's an ongoing conversation that seems not to have a clear. But Parliament, if Parliament took a strong position, and if they wanted these ministers to be in the House, clearly they will be there. It's just I think that sometimes they do the flexibility and understanding from the leadership.
And I love that you bring up that, and I'm going to bring you in here, Honorable Ritah, because at the beginning of the sittings, I think the biggest sticky point was that ministers were absent, and like he said, Timothy said, there would be times when sittings would be adjourned simply because the minister that's supposed to give this response is not there. And it almost also created, a rift between the prime minister and her ministers and the speaker of parliament. So how do we, push for compliance and adherence when it comes to, ministers' presence in parliament? But then I also know that there are some members of parliament that are also serving ministers. How do we strike balances in their service and leadership, in as much as they also have to deliver on their ministerial duties?
I think in the first instance is to recognize that at least their presence and in the house has greatly improved. Like you stated in the beginning, it was really bad.
Yeah.
And you cannot proceed without government
Yes.
being present because our concerns, the bills we deal with, most of them are brought by government. So the speaker to continue to put the stand on that is very right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, but they also come from a background knowing that most of these ministers sometimes are in the constituencies, are also somewhere doing government work. But what we have got to ensure is that they are present when they are required to be there because they have order paper.
Yeah.
They are the ones that issue us with government business that we handle of succeeding weeks, and they are aware of what they have presented to parliament. So it shouldn't be right for them to want to be whipped or to be dealt with as if it is a cat and chase game. They know what is coming. The order paper is shared. These two leaders are in constant touch between the government chief whip, the leader of opposition, the prime minister. And so for me, I think the ministers must know that and that's why you see sometimes the debate becomes very rough. People constantly warn them, where you are, you can come back where we are anytime, because it is by appointment.
Yeah.
And you're there to serve, to make sure that government work goes on, to make sure the people receive services. So if you're doubling as a member of parliament and a minister, it is very important, because if I have a colleague, for instance, who would be appointed a minister, they should actually do well on the floor, that where they can't, as a member who is not a minister, I can actually add on to their work, because it is cordial. But if, for instance, areas where ministers come from and you find that the minister does not support the members, that means even if there is a gap I can cover in their constituency, they are not covered. But ideally, as members of parliament, in our roles, if a person is appointed a minister, it would be easier for colleagues, to support them also, to deliver on the two fronts, in the executive, but also stay committed to their people. So the relationship should not be looked at in a form of rivalry, but complementarity. So it is very important, and I think the speaker airs it now and again, that ministers must be present. Without ministers, the parliament's leg is cut short. We can't stand firm because we need answers to be delivered. And I think also the Prime Minister, I trust Honorable Nabaye.
Yes.
I think she's on their case. She's on their case to make sure they appear. It's of late, really, we have not had instances where the bench is very empty. At least you have senior ministers there, you have other junior ministers present, and eventually, as the process goes on, every sitting at the end, you find that the bench is looking good. But sometimes, of course, the answers are not our desired satisfaction that I cannot stop. There's no reason why somebody should cry for a bridge, and the session ends. And some of these things are emergency. Like right now, roads are like a havoc.
Yes.
And
that Chira and Naguru.
It's not just Chira, even if you went to Mbarara city. And the situation is that even when there is a road fund, it was cut. Although we struggle to make sure at least reasonably it's not overcut. But there are roads, there are bridges beyond the capacity of local governments. And they are increasing because of what I started with, the climate change. They are increasing.
And I think also accessibility, because we only have 2 seasons really. The tropic, because we're in the equator area, we only have the rainy days and the sunny days. And so on the rainy days, if we do not have, channels that take away well built, that make sure that this rainwater is taken, our roads suffer. they erode and they suffer.
And actually, me as I was coming here this morning, of course, coming from Mbarara, we are talking about Kadgera, that path. No, what river is that? Before Masaka, Rukaya stretch.
The Ruela.
Yeah,
The Ruela.
it is always, it really, you know it, for many, year after year. So as I was coming, I was saying to myself, can't government do something? Can they do a high flyover? Because over the years, every year towards Christmas, there is an issue. Even right now, I'm told it was closed.
Oh wow!
Yes, it was closed. So maybe government needs to think sustainably in terms of those permanent road problems that we know of, but also issues of road equipment to make sure that prioritize district per district to be able to get these to work. Because without a road, a woman can't go to hospital.
True.
Without a road, I mean, you find people holding children and almost to be shoved off the road.
Yes.
We must speak for parents and mothers. That is not what we want to see. And for me, we launched quite a number of roads in the city. But as the minister came to launch, I was saying, yes, it looks a good road, but it's not adequate. A wheelchair, I gave almost 300 wheelchairs in partnership with a supportive non-government organization. And I was saying, where would they wheel them in Mbarara City? Where? That section of the people, the borders are here with us. As pedestrians, I love to walk. Where are they going to move? Because these are the cities we want to see.
Yes.
They would
good
rather
accessibility for everyone.
So that when you make a road, it is standard, it caters for everybody.
It has a cater for pedestrians, for cyclists, for people with accessibility problems, and then also for the motor
We
vehicles.
must take that challenge in this century. The excuse should not be just not money. Okay, can you have attempt to have few of those? If you upgrade two, then another financial year you upgrade others. There are still very many challenges to do. When I was giving those wheelchairs, you imagine the partnership I had with that gentleman. He's called Francis. I couldn't take him to the council. I think when people hear you say it, they think you're just saying it for the sake of the news. No. I would have loved him to go, be in the council, tell them more about persons with disability programs. You know why? There are stairs all over.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't. And when people came, I said, Francis, I'm sorry. I would have taken you because you have brought good work to us that we have worked on together for a year. But I can't host you in the very council we are serving together with. So what does that communicate? Yes, it communicates a lot. The probable government has people they have left behind because other government structures don't take it serious.
Interesting.
And for me, that is a very serious point.
And for every other entity, even different institutions where
and those are the questions.
Even in Uganda today, accessibility is quite problematic.
Those are the questions we always want ministers to come to the house and answer and give actions upon.
Actually,
what have you done?
Timothy there.
You see what, Honorable, and this actually is yet one of my very big disappointments. The matter of roads on that house, it's a song now.
Roads, electricity. I think every sitting I listen to roads, electricity, water.
Yes, members are raising this matter, especially the upcountry MPs.
Floods,
bridges are cut off. And the thing which disappointed me most, especially in this session, is during the action taken reports. Ministry of Works is given the time to present the action taken reports. Members having raised matters. The minister, it was a state minister, I don't know the name properly, but it was the state minister. He comes on the floor, and then I think in the middle of, he had just started, he says, I give me time to realign this statement. And then the alternative minister also comes in and says, it's okay, let's give them time to realign. And so for me really is that there has to be like firm position by parliament. These are matters which affect the people. And of course, what parliament is doing is extremely good in terms of at the national level and the other areas. But there has to be a deliberate effort in ensuring that the infrastructure, the water, I've seen the West Nile members of parliament have really, really pushed for the aspect of electricity.
Or electricity.
for it to be
They've
on
done
the
a good,
grid.
yes.
They actually
And
said,
the beauty with that was it was a citizen litigation that brought to the forefront of the members of parliament of West Nile, like, look, you are our MP, and this is what West Nile looks like. So we want you, when you go on that floor of parliament, to hearken and make sure that they electrify the West Nile region.
Yeah, so actually you find some of the concerns they raise is that there are places which don't have electricity totally.
Yes.
And even those that have, probably they get that they have twice in a week.
And it's
you
a
have it on
private
Tuesday,
supplier.
You have it on Tuesday, and then
And
next
others
week
once a quarter.
So that brings a very big issue, and for me that also brings me on the aspect of budgeting, and it's something that I don't know what can be done really. Maybe Honorable can take
Yeah,
it
but
further.
also I sit on the trade committee. Budget comes from the finances that largely the country should be able to generate. Yes, we also borrow, but the efforts to increase production internally are still far from desired. How do we support local enterprises?
Yeah.
You know it.
That's important.
And for starters, we must applaud Ugandans and the government for trying to fill the gaps that were very daring during the COVID times.
Yes.
That we had sundries produced here, we had masks, we had
Even sanitizers.
sanitizers. We had quite a number of things to fill the gaps. But quickly now, we have forgotten. For me, if that drive is maintained, I think we can be able to do something. For one, I am calling upon people who can invest in sanitary pads. For me, it is one of the things I would want to see.
We have
You imagine
Shiba.
how much do we procure?
We need more Shibas.
We
out
need
there.
many, so that they can be affordable but also available. So the government, and sometimes when you assess loans through UDC, you find there's still a bit of questions. And the questions can only be answered
by
ministers. That is why, to kind of wrap that, the issue of saying they must come to parliament. When they invite them for committees, they must come, but come with answers. And sometimes because you call them, and then sometimes the language becomes very hard from the committee. If you don't want to appear, then the third letter comes with the hard language. And then they start to feel being rubbed the wrong way. But what gives me hope is that they understand, because majority of them are members
of parliament.
Yeah. So when they go to the executive also, they continue to assert, so that the president and the executive can be seen also to play their roles. On that note, as I conclude, I think even if you're leading an organization, sometimes there can be a few times you can smile in a meeting, but sometimes it's not called for. Yeah, when things are not moving, that's why you see parliament is like, no, we can't operate like this. And
on that note, and I think as Timothy responds, in your additions, I hope we can also on the Cybers talk about the Rules and Discipline Committee, how on a constant, I think this year we've had over 3 disciplinary actions taken within Parliament, and how that does it help with decorum? Does it help with procedures? Does it help with checking Parliament when it comes to having all these disciplinary actions taken?
So I just needed to give one point that I'd highlighted.
Yeah.
So we have the Auditor General making reports every year.
Yes.
And they are presented to the Speaker. Actually, the most recent was I think 3 weeks back. Now the Auditor General makes the findings, comes up with recommendations. What happens? There are some of the resolutions that they have taken, and all these things that are happening. One of my issues with Parliament is they are the ones who hold the carrot and stick. They are appropriate. The thing is, even before what went wrong in the previous cycle is dealt with, you are giving them more money, which is actually promoting the impunity in this case. You allocated money to do this. The Auditor General is telling you this didn't happen. The money was misappropriated. This was swindled, and that kind of thing. And yet you go ahead and even give the money. So it's an issue that for me Parliament has to as we have the certificate of gender compliance, financial all the certificates. Actually, there should be an addition of a check of what had happened previously before we give you money. It's a fair thing. If
So,
you have,
so that we know what the money did,
yeah, I should
or
not
if
give you
you
money
can tell us
before your
what you
account.
did with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
money.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. Let's take a break and then we come back and talk about, issues of committees and their mandate when it comes to parliament. But then also the recent, debacle around whether we are having a lot of more focus on, checking people's discipline than doing the work that needs to be. Don't go away.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back to Civic Space TV. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. But I also want you to go and have these conversations on an individual basis so that you have the tabs of what is happening in your parliament, because it is your parliament. I continue to have this conversation with Honorable Ritah and Timothy from Parliament Watch. And ladies and gentlemen, I want us to dive into, the conduct of members of parliament in and out of parliament. A lot of, what has taken place in the House has had a spillover within the public discourse. And one of those things was, on discipline and decorum within the House. One, I want us to interrogate, the Rules and Discipline Committee. Recently, they put in a censure motion for Honorable Persis Namganza, and they had different, asks. And one of the key things that I remember watching was a Prime Minister begging Honorable Persis to apologize so that, the event is taken away. But also in that same vein, Honorable Zake was taken back into the disciplinary committee for the second time, I think, this year. And all of a sudden, it looked like we had lost track, because I think in that moment they were sharing action reports in that stance, and different ministries were giving their action reports on resolutions from Parliament. And in the same vein, we had a censure motion for Honorable Persis, and then we have, a disciplinary case for Honorable Zake. So how do we dissect conduct when it comes to the members of Parliament within the House, but then also outside? Because it's hard to defend what is happening. After that, there was an interview on NBS with Honorable Persis, and the intricacies of her conversation is that it was a personal attack, but this personal attack has become public discourse as well, but also parliamentary business. How do we deal with this, framing and shape, but also the deterioration of debate that is happening in the 11th House?
Thank you, Tricia. I want to say that the parliamentary procedures are there, they are written, and parliament after parliament, they are improved depending on the situation. But also to say that parliament, the caliber of leaders, they are the cream of the cream of the nation, because by the processes they go through to come to parliament. But also to say these cases you've highlighted, I don't think they're the first of its kind. Even in other parliaments, they have been there. That's why the Rules Committee exists, because it is proven that they have work to do. But to add that the members in question are not new members of parliament like me, they are seniors. So they know the rules of parliament and what they mean and what they stand for. And you are an honorable member of parliament even when you're sleeping. That whatever you do, say, reflects on that honor, but also on the institution that you represent. And when facts are written by the rule, I think usually it is to abide. And when you have been in conflict, there are systems to be able to address, which are there. For instance, the rules committee is there. The court, I was in parliament when Honorable Namuganza was there, and she said, was she planning to serve court? And then the last time for Honorable Zaka, I think I was in Juba for the parliamentary games. I didn't physically be there, but I have read, I have seen what could have happened. I think for me, to treat parliament like that is not exemplary, and it is wrong, because even on an ordinary level, when you come from a family and they know everyone is a night dancer, sometimes even when you're not night dancing, they will say,
you're a night dancer.
Yeah, so it is always good for institutions, even families. For me, I want to tell you the privilege I enjoyed in my village and vicinity, even when my parents were long gone, was it was like they were always there. If, for instance, people were waylaying girls to kidnap and marry, they wouldn't touch me. That's how I survived, because they would say, hey, that family will kill you. You touch their daughter? Because for me, there had been an attempt, I think like in senior 3, that people were really planning how this girl is bright and somebody wished. But I was lucky that my colleague, my friend came and told me, she said, you here today? I said, why? She said, they were planning that they were going to kidnap you and marry you. But you know why it didn't happen? Because they knew what my family stands for. And for me, I think parliament must also stand with discipline and the code of conduct, which is known to all of us. If we were newcomers trying to learn, some of people would be lenient and say. But also, me sitting when Honorable Namuganza was there, I was actually taken aback. The issue of generalization, to me, as Ritah, even if she met me tomorrow, she missed the point. Trying to think that everyone in that house was her enemy. And me as an individual, I wondered, I said, this lady, when did I
hear you?
Why should she stand and categorize me as an enemy? I was actually very concerned in my capacity, because she said that all of us were against her. And the way I look is how I look. I was like, me? Why would I? You understand? And actually that day, I think that's where things escalated and turned upside down. People had come to listen and really objectively. But I don't know, whatever is happening behind the curtains, she was overtaken, whether by anger or she could answer for herself. It went out of hand. And actually many people are saying, all of us? So for her, she planned to insult all of us, even when that platform was meant to say, that is not what I intended. I intended to mean. I have nothing against her. I see her as a senior minister, as a member of parliament. So for me, I think no one should flip the script.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And maybe Timothy, there on that very note, how do we revive critical debate when it comes to the 11th Parliament, especially because there is work to be done? And so in dealing with rules of procedure and in having, conversations continue, how do we revive critical debate in that house?
So, Tricia, 3 things for me. The first is that discipline should never be compromised. We have rules of procedure, we have laws in our countries. The fair thing is to comply to them. And any breach of the same, the consequences equally are provided of the same. And so if we are preaching for compliance of the law, we shouldn't be the first
to break it.
It trivializes the whole conversation. 2 is, for me, on the capacity of members of parliament. We are in the 2nd session, and we can't say that they have all familiarized themselves with with the rules and how to conduct themselves on the floor of parliament. It's a continuous process. We have what it used to be called the Parliamentary Institute of Studies, that was supposed to equip, help members of parliament over and over in terms of training or on whatever instance, whether it's on procedure, on rules of procedure, whatever areas. It was supposed to be an avenue where you equip members of parliament to be well, and even on the floor of parliament. That institution has been brought now under the CPS. It's a department under CPS. For me, which I think that it's a huge disservice to its original idea.
But Timothy, on that note, and like how Honorable Atukwasa said, these are not new members in the House. They've been here before, and they've had the rules of procedure with them for a while now. And like she also said, it would make sense if we were lenient with the fact that these are new members, they've just come into the House and they're getting the grip of what is happening. But the particular said members ought to be an example to the people within the House. So how do we check them? Especially because it's not new. And to be in the committee more than once we would understand, but twice is that now you've deteriorated and you've debased parliament at best.
So what you're saying is true, but also there must be a reason, and probably this cannot be discussed in formal discussions. Why passes has had the same issue in different parliaments. There must be some sort of reasoning on why the same has happened, and probably she goes with it. We have, and you've cited the Zake issue. He was in the disciplinary action, in the disciplinary committee. Action was taken. He was removed from the commission.
Yes.
Now he's in here, but so specifically. So for me, really on this, I look at it in two fronts. We may just look at what could be the cause factors for some of this. Is it just indiscipline and character and attitude of these specific individuals, or there could be substantive matters that they are raising? Two is on the leadership of parliament. I think that the leadership of parliament, while there has to be the enforcement of discipline, there are matters which can be handled at the leadership level in terms of choosing which battles to take on. I know you should not take all the battles, because also talking about discipline, it's not an independent factor. There is the political environment. There is I think there is the executive sometimes, which is a very subtle conversation. The way the executive has interest on some of these things, and so it can't be a conversation in its own. But primarily when it comes to discipline, and specifically for this one of Minister Namuganza, it's a total indiscipline, which Parliament should take a very firm position. They have not censured. There have been attempts in the past to censure ministers, and then somehow it dies off. And so when we're talking about discipline, it is a matter that must be dealt with clearly. Although in this one, of course, you find I've heard the party, the ruling party saying they want to find ways of bringing peace between the speaker and now Namuganza, as though it was an issue between the two.
And because I didn't want to go into that, because on the outside and out of parliament, when you listen to Honorable Paz's President Namuganza, it is almost as though it is not a question of parliament, concern, but a private issue between two households. And I'm very worried, because even in her statement at the end of her submission, and she was like, at a later date I will come and table this. And almost as though these private issues between the two of these ladies, or the two members of parliament, have now become national and parliamentary business. And that is where I am worried that we are going to carry our homes into parliament.
For me, I have no history, absolutely, about Namuganza's disagreement.
And it is good to not have it.
With the Right Honorable Ritah Among. What I have seen happen is how she has treated Parliament. So histories they have written, unwritten, I think most of us are not privy. So the issue is handled, with utmost sense and objectivity of how she ridiculed.
Yeah.
And that's where most of us stand.
Exactly.
And that's why I told you that day when she came, she actually made matters worse, because members were very objective, and we shall keep to be objective to say, what did she say or do? That's what we saw. The speaker was not cheering, it was her on the microphone. Yeah. The prime minister tried to plead. So from an objective person, I saw with my eyes, I heard with my eyes.
Yes.
So I cannot try to assume to know what I don't know or see what I did not see. I think discipline has no crosscut. If a child steps in the plate, you turn it different.
I hear you.
You know, so the public additions in Runyankore, they call them, you add in salt and then spices. Those can always come. And I think it is always controversial in Parliament when such things come. But I think it is very important that Parliament takes its ground to maintain discipline, or next time you will see people undressing.
I hear you.
What would that mean to the public? You will see people powering acids on each other. We must be safe
and grounded in
on the principles of Parliament, and more particularly when we are in the House debating national issues. So whether the executive would want to handle it, that's a different matter. We'll see how those things unfold. But as Parliament is concerned, it is unparliamentary, because I carried my rules of procedure. That's what it says. Even when we went through the inductions you're talking about and the trainings, that is the plea. You must behave in this particular manner. And then the committee must be listening. I actually was on the ad hoc committee.
I hear you.
Even when she was appearing, for me, that didn't occur to me that she's being which one. Because all people appeared, including those who ran away when they realized they could have been arrested. So when you're doing this work, you're representing your country and your people, and you do it with utmost justice to deliver. And sometimes people imagine that the speaker will call you and say, this is what you will decide. I didn't see that happen to me as an individual. I was given the terms of reference, we dissected them, we agreed on which stakeholders to meet, we agreed on how people must be listened to, how they will come and present. But what happens is people want to judge. All they know. We even had people who would appear with bodyguards, because from what they are being summoned and what they were involved in, they will come ready, thinking they are going to be
arrested.
And what you wanted is to hear from them and make your deductions.
Interesting.
But sometimes the people of what they know they have done, they come actually much, not just equipped in a good way, but in a negative way. Even the tone they start with, then at the end they realize, they wanted to hear from me what my facts are, what do I stand, what did I do and didn't do, which process did I follow, because that was the main critical thing, the processes. So for me, I think we should not try to lure negatively public sympathy against Parliament when the facts are very clear.
I hear you.
Yeah.
And maybe Timothy, and not to just let that go, but in that same vein, I think one of the things Honorable Zake was tabling on the floor of Parliament was on, the disappearances that are happening. But the bigger picture of that is on the question of human rights. I'm more worried because the drone endemic is still here with us, and people continue to disappear without any trace. And this is a conversation we were hoping to have a lot more on the floor of Parliament. And it's a miss because it has not happened. We continue to have disappearances, and I know there are committees, specific on human rights issues. And recently we were having Honorable Abiga here, and she was like, I sit on these committees and they brought torture victims, and some of them were not actually torture victims. They had a whole fabricated story behind them. And while some were, the majority weren't really torture victims. And so on questions of human rights, there's, this I don't want to say silence, but there is this lack of conversation and debate around it when it comes to the 11th Parliament.
Can I come in
And
before him?
it's okay. And maybe also as you're addressing it, you help us understand whether there is active, conversation that is being planned to happen in dealing with the drone pandemic.
Actually, for me, Ritah, and what I believe in, and now as a member of parliament, there's one thing that takes me aback. No one should be tortured.
Yeah.
And we have seen women being tortured decades and decades. That's, me, the way people come out on political torture, I want to urge them to join us on social torture.
Yeah.
Women burnt with acids. I want that voice equally to join that conversation because they are also human rights
Issues. Yeah.
on the rape. Do you know how many women are raped? How many children were raped in COVID? Then we should all join and turn that parliament upside down in havoc. Equally, the way they are angry, I don't support that Honorable Sewanyana and should be in jail that much.
Yeah. And
But I call also them in my space. That can we have all those people who pregnated all these girls and we add them onto that and tell government to account. I will join them. But for me, as long as people don't join my struggle, I might also not join their struggle because these are all struggles for Ugandans.
yeah.
That is how I stand. So whether that warrants that I should go on the floor of parliament and bang tables and turn, I tell you there would be no parliament even today. With all the injustices that has happened to women, a 2-year-old is raped and even the victim runs away. We are in a crisis of teenage mothers where all the achievements that have been made by the government have been reduced. We are still in a crisis to have them go back to school so that we can save their future. Those are human rights. That's what I wanted to emphasize. When people think that political rights are the only human rights, no. What happens to women, what happens to girls, they are human rights, and that is not right.
Yeah, I do.
That is what I wanted to say, so that possibly those two angles can be joined together.
Dissected together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And please come in there, Timothy.
So, first of all, I really like what Honorable is saying, because you see, the angle of human rights doesn't have color, political party. Human rights are human rights, and if there is any breach, all of us should stand and speak in the same voice.
Yeah.
And so, recently, during this second session, the Human Rights Committee presented a report covering, I think, 2 years back.
Yes.
Like for the last 2 years of all these human rights issues that have happened. And if you look at the report, it's actually well detailed, making out very, very clear recommendations, cutting across the aspects of drones, the arbitral arrests through drones, and it makes a very firm position on that. The mixing of military courts and the civilians. It's a well detailed report. Now, where the answer seems to now come from is now where the 11th Parliament is going. Other than just you accounting on these specific recommendations that we've made,
Can we have
through the Treasury,
accountability?
can the Minister of Justice at an appropriate time come on the floor? Because I think that's the line ministry.
Yes.
Come and account where have you reached as far as our recommendations are concerned, and wait to see that. We hope that Parliament can actually give time on this specific matter, sufficient time, and looks into it. Because you see, listening to the different voices, all of us seems to be, we are in the same trajectory, saying that the abuse, the arbitral arrest, the torture shouldn't be happening. It's the same talk, just I think in different languages. And so it's something that there has to be a very firm position that Parliament takes. Two, I think that specifically when you raise the issue of Honorable Zaki. And this goes back to the aspect of procedure. I know that this matter has been raised over and over and over, and sometimes it's not being given the attention that it should be given. And so you find the opposition members of parliament a bit agitated that this should be given urgent. But even in that circumstances, there has to be decorum in the house.
True.
It can't be that if you really need it, you jump and you want to break and cause the whole house into. And I liked how the deputy speaker handled the matter, adjourned a bit the session briefly, and then went and handled the matter and came back, which was very, 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 very good. And so you see that we have to stick on the rules. That I have a very burning issue, but even within the circumstances,
I'll address it within the
there
rules.
has to be a manner in which these are. There was a complaint raised by Honorable Matthias Mpuga in his presser for the year this week, and he said that there was a meeting which was scheduled between the opposition and the executive to address those concerns which had been raised previously about the arrest and what have you. And his complaint was that whereas they were there, the executive were not present. Of course, which is a very unfortunate incident. But ideally, Parliament has to continue pushing and demanding. And actually, there are two things that personally I've been pushing for. One is to have a certificate of human rights compliance before appropriation of any budget. We can actually choose to have it. If we have one for gender compliance, we can have one on human rights. That as you come to present your budget,
please give us a certificate of
let's have a clearance, a certificate of the same, and that will actually be very good.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Two, I know that this may not be. The other thing was to domicile the Human Rights Committee as an accountability committee to be under probably the opposition. I know that even within the NRM, like when I read the report, I saw some of the recommendations that I thought, it being under the leadership of NRM, they wouldn't have come out that much clear. But I'm just thinking that probably to create some sort of space and accommodation within different parties, it can also go under the accountability committee.
That's important. Ritah.
Yeah, it is important to emphasize that Parliament of Uganda does work for all Ugandans without discrimination, and also specifically for human rights. You know, when you're executing, you must look at every case because aspects of human rights affect us all, and whatever picture is painted reflects on the country. So the public shouldn't think that when members of parliament are conducting their business because they are NRM or not, like I said, that they use one lens. No, because what affects, if they are arbitrary arrests, they are unlawful. And it's not the first time. Even the 10th Parliament had lots. Remember the clash with the late Honorable Tumwine. So the Parliament is there to defend Ugandans where there is need, to make sure that the executive is seen to be protecting their rights, but also to provide the security and protection that they are mandated to give every citizen of Uganda. So therefore, the issue to say of disappearances, it touches us all, and we all condemn it in its utmost sense. That is not the Uganda. And I think the government should be able to have answers. But I've also seen on the side of government how they have accepted some. To say, yes, some of the individuals, we know where they are and we have them. But is to continue to see as Parliament, where would we come in to make strong statements so that they can be brought.
Please bring the people back.
Bring back to court. And they go through a fair trial, and then if they are convicted, then we know the case is written to reduce, the suffering of their people, but also in their right for people to go through under trial. And I'm here for this reason and how long. And that's one. Actually, I have such a case of my neighbor whose child went to work as a domestic worker in one of these countries, and she ended on the wrong arm of the law. And right now, the answer the mother told me, I only need to know, because it is alleged she had a knife going to stab her boss. Of course, there is, being a girl, there must be,
Yes,
was the
some
boss going to
harassment,
attack her, maybe rape her, maybe had been, perineally raping her. So now, they don't know how long is she in prison. Is it the death sentence? So sometimes when you go through under fair trial, it is easy for the people and also yourself as the person being accused to know that I have been heard, justice is seen.
But then, and also to have numbers of who has been abducted, or who has been arrested, who has been arraigned into the courts of law, but then also who is in prison serving time, because these numbers are just, and we don't have the actual number of how many people have been taken.
Some could have just been killed by thugs. I have a friend journalist, really. He sent me a pic. His head was split into two.
Exactly.
You also know of a gentleman who was indeed hacked to death. He just said, the wife let me go to the nearby shop, and he never came back home. So it would be very important for government and those categories, but also to say that the government have grown in those, that was history. So I think when I know government is always listening, the executive, that as the generation of now, we need reassurance.
And accountability.
Yes, we need reassurance that that will stop. Yeah, that will stop, because we yes, the credit for peace should not be turned away.
And we no longer have forests. As Uganda, we no longer have forests.
Should not be turned away. That's why I keep to say we need safety, all of us.
Yes.
Whether I'm in my bathroom, whether I'm walking on the road. So even as we gear towards the Christmas season, that security should be beefed up. People will travel at night. People will probably party until morning. And we've been in those situations where there was no fear.
And personally, I fear, imagine 8:30. I have a friend, one of the co-hosts of this show was attacked at 8:30.
Yes,
crossing to his house.
The number of journalists that have been attacked in Kampala, Mbarara, where I come from, their gadgets taken, I'm telling you, is overwhelming. And their expensive equipment, that's their livelihood. But also ordinary Ugandans. You know, when we were growing up, as they would talk on radios over these things, when we would be going through Mbarara, it was very funny. Sometimes you're growing up, you want to see. Do you know what we would do sometimes? You would see a soldier coming and you refuse to get out of the way. Because you really want to say, because they would say, I'm 7. Ahmed, they won't touch you. They PDF are good. And would be very happy. After he has passed you, actually, he has decided to pass on the side. You are happy, you are like, yes.
That is, and I think language is important because when I grew up, I was also sure that the military would protect me on any moment. Today, my certainty in that mandate is questionable if they wouldn't attack.
And for me, I think President Museveni would hear us. And for me, that is a very important message. To the extent that if anything happened, somebody would choose to be in the arms of the UPDF. So we don't want that to go
So we
away.
need to revive our military confidence, the confidence of Ugandans in their military.
We still have level of confidence, but some instances have taken it a bit lower. We still need it to go back. Because it is the army we have to protect us in here and outside. So for me, I subscribe to NRM. That we should not let it go.
Let me bring Timothy to
So could it be, the military, they are referred to as the disciplined forces.
Yes.
With the meaning that they actually, their utmost item is discipline.
Yes.
And that, of course, now builds the confidence with the public. Could it be true that the politicization of the military has brought us to where we are today?
And especially also, and not just a politicization, but then also the derogatory of their commanders. Because when you have a general at the helm of such an institution make, seemingly uncoordinated comments, it becomes very critical for us, and also have parliament and military in the same conversation, because we have military presence also in parliament. Have we eroded, and like Timothy asked, and diluted the essence of the military in the face of Ugandans, but also even in our own in our own experience of who they really are?
For me, what I would say is sometimes when you're in a journey, there's where you reach, and probably there are good things to do, and then you forget. If you came carrying your water, maybe it is finished. Maybe there's a need to refill, and especially the community engagements that used to happen, and they were deliberate programs for the army to be in the face of the community, seem to be helping. I know Tarehe Sita is coming, but usually when you are near the barracks, you would be the most cleanest village, you would be most served in terms, of course, Bombo is doing well. Mbarara, we have a school that used to be for young to train people. So I think they need to redraw a program that again puts back the military to the public in a good way. But also publicity. You know, one thing, somebody said, if you wrong a customer, one, they will tell to 100 people.
Yes.
But if you do good to 50, they might actually tell 10. So I also attribute it to the level of communication. WhatsApp, radio, you know. So also the military needs to deploy people who can counteract. Because really it's not that they go on rampage and kill, but those are some of the acts, you know, that maybe have happened, mistake in the process of
and I think Major Felix Kulaija is doing a good job.
Yes, but he can't be just alone.
I hear you.
You imagine the whole day you're waiting for 9 p.m.
I hear you.
There used to be, like Mbarara Division used to have a PR. I used to hear all these people, the Mbires, they were in different corners. And actually in every news bulletin, they used to be from different corners.
Entities,
and I no longer hear it. So for me, I think that has created the gap. And the public think, the negative we hear is the only truth. No. So for me, my recommendation would be, if you're listening, could I get the president? And those people, I usually sit near generals, by the way, as an independent. They're usually near me. I will give them their buy, and they listen. Masiko is there. Ruelu is usually there. There's Arenyu. I will, because they are there. So to reach out to the population and again reaffirm, we can get back to that because we need it very badly.
Timothy, two things happened this year that put Parliament in highlight mostly. One was the Penalty Coffee saga, and how the whole of Parliament was in agreement that this was a bad deal for Ugandans and was standing against it. And it was important to position themselves in that moment, because they did a great job in helping stop a bad deal for the country, Uganda. And whereas the president had other alternative views in regard to penalty, it was in that moment Parliament, took a precedence to first protect Ugandans. And I think I applaud them for that. But then in that same light as well, we had, the passing of the resolution around the purchase of Rocco Company that seemingly was shoddy and continues to give me moments to ask whether the passing of resolutions under the nay and yay and over A is still a good stance in, making some of these buy-ins or passing these resolutions. What do you think we would have done differently? One, in addressing the purchase of Rocco, but then also in dealing with, and I don't want to imagine that also dealing with the penalty, we did it well, but also in dealing with the penalty coffee saga.
So Tricia, thank you. You raised two issues. Those are the penalty issue on the coffee, and now the purchasing of shares in the Rocco company. So the first on the issue of penalty, for me that spoke to how, if Parliament decided to take a position and say this is our line on all matters, we would be very far.
Exactly.
And you saw how Parliament came unanimously on this matter, and they put their voice and stamped their feet and said, this, we say no to it. However, the developments that I've seen seem to be also taking a very unproductive trajectory.
Yeah.
So on the action taken reports, that was one of the items that the executive was supposed to respond to. But the games that I saw there seems to be not very interesting. So that specific action report, at the time when Ministry of Trade came to present their action taken reports, in part of their submission, when they were asked, they said, no. It is Ministry of Finance supposed to give a response on this specific matter. Ministry of Finance comes in, and they were responding to the actions they have taken on Parliament recommendation. They bounce it back to Ministry of Trade. Now, Parliament directs Parliament directs Ministry of Finance. Of course, that was just recently, last week. Parliament directs Ministry of Finance that we want the way forward on this and what progress has gone on. But also, that you see, it seems to be a game.
seesaw.
Yeah. Ideally, there should have been a very clear. But also, I think Parliament will have to follow up on this, because it is a very if there is no very clear actions taken on them, it may again pass and it goes. Yet there was a very unanimous voice that this is a wrong deal for Uganda. At least as of then, the president, I think, a bit tried to convince the country, but it looks majority didn't buy it.
A lot of people didn't buy into
Yeah.
it.
So the second issue that you actually raised on the purchase of Rocco, I know that I have my reservations really in the manner in which that resolution was passed. And that day it was the Deputy Speaker who was chairing the session. There seemed not to be a clear position, at least from the members, on whether they were accepting it or whether. But the decision by the speaker was that it was aye. The debate on the same was not given much attention on that specific motion. But the deputy speaker, at least from my observation, the motion was passed without very, very clear debate. And so also that speaks to the whole idea of some of these critical decisions that the executive is also interested in. I know that they could have done it better.
Yeah.
They could have probably do more a bit of engagements, given the members a bit more debate and have a more clear way. That was a very unclear vote on that, but it passed. I've seen a section of the public, they were saying they're going to challenge it on the court. But also the advantage is we have the third arm of government to check Parliament. So if you have any concerns, let's say there is a bill which was irregularly passed, you have the motion, you have all these things, then you have another arm that can look into the matter. Yeah.
And as we wind down, Honorable Atukwasa, even when you respond to that, what's the way forward in this Parliament? As we wind down the year, I know there's been work that has been done, and we commend the 11th Parliament for that. The bills passed, and the action taken reports are very highlightive of the work that you've actually been able to do as the 11th Parliament. But as we look into the future and lens into the future, what should we expect different? Or, have a semblance of not just brand newness, but, a revival in the 11th Parliament?
Thank you very much. I think, we have had our fair share of challenges, and then we have achievements. We are moving well. Lifelong learning, it never stops. But what would you see, I think, is a committed Parliament, especially with good leadership that is prepared to deliver, and also to deliver to retain the confidence that Uganda has put in us. Of course, usually when you're performing and you're a young Parliament, like majority of us are, everyone thinks no order will prevail. no critical things will be handled, but I think they speak for themselves. So the future is to legislate for Ugandans, and I don't think that differs. But also to, politics is to continuously to engage or try to check the executive to make sure that Uganda is moving forward. The money spent is used for the right things. Ugandans get services, and also to see. I sit on the Committee of Trade, Tourism and Industry and Climate Change, but also to see that Ugandans are also given equal opportunities to be able to trade, to be able to manufacture and create employment. There are issues to do with who benefits from tax holidays, who gets incentives for land, and all these questions, because we breathe what Ugandans breathe. We are here 24/7. When you go to a community outreach, those are the questions you face. Where are the jobs? The phone calls we receive. People are looking for jobs. People are looking for drugs in hospitals. People are looking for water and electricity. People are saying about school fees. It is so high. How can I afford to bring back the trust in the education sector so that people are able to go to school and find the teachers there? There's so many conversations. The remuneration. Of course, the conversation, the remuneration will never end.
That's true.
As a social scientist,
I think we need a minimum wage.
The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, even if you put a minimum wage, it will always be another endeavor to revise the minimum of the minimum wage. Yeah, because, the costs change and all that happens. But for us to continue to be seen, we are a parliament of the people, as our vision tells us and the values. What are the people saying and what are we seen to be doing? Governance and democracy is very critical in terms of accountability, in terms of who takes what, where are the resources going. That is our role. And right now, the process of budgeting is going on. But also the issue fundamentally that the public usually gets agitated about. How do you have resources being returned at the end of the financial year when there is too much to do?
That's true.
That is also a crack to feel. How? And usually before it happens,
consolidated fund, and you're like, why didn't you deliver?
Yeah, last year I was quickly calling my city clerk. How are we standing? But also critical is that sometimes the allocations, finance sends money late, and sometimes you find the processes to go through. So also that needs to be
actually, you see what the 11th Parliament adopted. The funds released report by Ministry of Finance.
Yes.
It will help to resolve what on
the return of money into the
consolidated. Because you see, they say we have allocated this amount of money, and in this quarter there is this percentage, and that's why actually just maybe even as we come to, I wanted to tell Honorable that the public, even when the public demands so much of you, is because too much also is given to you. Too much is given, much is expected. The 11th Parliament, I keep mentioning that it's one of the most educated Parliament that we've had. 39% of our members of Parliament at least have a master's degree, including Honorable here. She has a master's degree in public policy with a number of PhDs. We have close to 37% having a bachelor's degree. We have 3.1% with PhDs.
And so they know that the business of the
you
house.
have less than 10%. So clearly these are educated people. If education anyway was a benchmark. So these are people who know they are educated and they are experienced and their profession is in their field. And so even when you find the public demanding, it's because really much has been given
to them.
For me, I can never cry about the public demanding, and Ugandans in general. Even when they rise on some instances, like on local radios, and they're saying, oh, Rwanda is doing this better, Kenya is doing this better. For me, I'm happy. Because Ugandans by nature, they don't want to be beaten at something.
That's true.
I know it. And especially my people in Mbarara, even to hear wind that Rwanda is doing this better than them, it gives them sleepless nights. The question is, what are you doing? I think it is a good competitive kind of thing. And a leader, if you're not tasked to deliver, what else should you be tasked to do?
Indeed.
I know there are other extras people expect. For instance, money. I can only give as much because I don't have too much either.
Indeed.
So for me, even when somebody calls and says, Honorable, I need 5 million, my son is doing, he wants to be a pilot. I say, oh, I'm grateful you consider that I can be of help. How have you been doing it before? What has changed? What can you change on your side?
Indeed.
Because for me, I don't need to lie that I will do it. No, money is scarce.
Everywhere.
It's scarce everywhere.
And I'm going to end this conversation here because one time is done, but then also we will never exhaust the work of the 11th Parliament. But we continue to ask them to do the work of legislating, oversight work, representation and budgeting. That will continue. But from us here at Civic Space TV, thank you for joining us. We will review what the mandate will be next year as we budget and as we plan for this country. Thank you for joining us. Bye.